Hey, what's up? Alex from Metamind Music here. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I go about mixing the kick drum. So how I go process it and tweak the plugins to create the most impact as possible within the mix. Before we dive in, I want to give you my free Workflow Wizardry PDF, which is a 7-step process. It's a framework to help you take your initial ideas all the way to a finished product that you can share with the world. And it helps you overcome confusion and writer's block and overwhelm by having a proven framework that you can just follow along and get your song finished. So you can go ahead and download that at metamindmusic.com/workflow, or you can find it in the description below. I'll throw a link there. All right, so before we dive in, I'll give you a little taste of what we're working with today. All right, so you got a little taste of that. It's definitely a pretty crazy progressive metal song that I wrote. These principles, however, will apply to any genre of music or any kind of kick drum that you're processing. It will, if you want a specific settings or exactly what I'll be doing, will probably apply best for rock music, hard rock music, metal, or like electronic, super aggressive electronic music. Then these exact settings will apply. I just want to preface this before we jump in that I did program these drums in Superior Drummer because I didn't have the means to record a drummer, nor am I an actual drummer. So I decided to program the whole performance within Superior Drummer. And once I was done programming the MIDI, I then routed all of the individual components of the drums to their own audio tracks inside of Ableton and recorded the audio so that I can process it as if I recorded a real drummer. And this is super important for those of you that are programming your drums and want it to sound realistic or want to have maximum control over the processing, is that once you're done programming the MIDI, you want to route the output of all of your MIDI tracks to individual audio tracks. So then you can print the audio and commit your performance to audio. So so this helps you because it helps you avoid going back to tweaking MIDI while you're mixing. And it also commits you to a specific sound, and it gives you maximum control by being able to process every track individually. So I just wanted to preface that before jumping in. I'll go ahead and solo these drums just so you can hear a little bit closer what's going on. Right on. And we're going to jump into what's going on specifically with the kick. So I'll solo the kick without all these plugins. This is the plugins I have applied to this kick drum. And I'll show you how it sounds just raw from Superior Drummer. And the first plugin that I use on the kick drum is my SSL channel EQ, which is a great tool because it doesn't show you the visual representation of your EQ graph. And sometimes this can throw you off if you're doing intense EQ moves, because you can start to question yourself and be like, should I be removing or adding this much? It looks kind of crazy. So this helps you kind of mix more so with your ears than your eyes, which is super important. So if we look into what's actually going on with this EQ, I have a couple of pretty big boosts here, and then I'm taking a lot out of 700 hertz about, doing a pretty big cut here. And I'll kind of show you what it sounds like before and after this plugin. So we'll turn it off, throw it on. So just already with that small amount of EQ, really accentuates a different character of the kick. It really enhances the high end and like the kind of high mids. I'll kind of cycle between all of these different boosts so you can see what they're doing individually. So I've got about 8 dB boosted at 8K. This is a big boost, which really helps you cut through the mix, especially if there's a lot of loud, dense other tracks that you need your kick drum to cut through. So you'll notice that added a lot of high end, a lot of high frequency so that it cuts through better. And I'll show you this other cut that we have going on at about 4K or so. So I'll zero this. So this adds a little bit more sharpy thump, like a little bit of rounded edge, more so like what you would hear of the beater on the kick drum, and just helps that mid-range stick out a little bit. And then this 700 hertz is typically a boxy frequency, usually around this range, like 700, 800 hertz is the range where kick drums get really boxy or square sounding, and it usually like kind of sounds like a cardboard box. But I'll let you listen to what the difference is here. So that EQ move kind of just takes away all that low mid boxiness, and it kind of rounds out the higher frequencies that we just boosted. A few other things going on here. I'm actually using every part of this plugin. So I'm using the filters at about 40 hertz. I'm cutting everything below 40 hertz, and the high pass filters I'm not really using. And then at the sub frequencies, I'm boosting about 3 dB around 70 hertz, but this kind of changes depending on what kind of tuning you're in, I find. And with this song, the tunings of the guitars are in drop A, so having a little bit lower hertz really melds with the guitars, I found. So, and I'm using this little bell button, which kind of it kind of makes the EQ move less narrow, so it makes it a little bit more subtle in how you're boosting, because it boosts a bunch of neighboring frequencies at the same time. I'm also using this built-in compressor. I'll show you a before and after, but right now I have a really slow attack so that the beginning of the transient can come through very easily. And then I have a really quick release so that it stops compressing very quickly. So basically this will accentuate the beginning part of the transient, so it'll sound like the kick drum is getting hit even harder. And I'm compressing a fair amount, but not too much. So I'll just give you a nice before and after. So just that little compression move really makes every kick drum sound like it's getting hit a little bit harder. And it also evens out a little bit of the velocities, because when I program these drums, I use quite a few different velocity values. Also, this little switch here on the plugin applies the compression after the EQ, which I find that's the order I prefer to do it, because once you've done all these pretty crazy boosts and cuts, you want the compression to act afterwards instead of before, so that you're just smoothing out any kind of crazy moves you've done. So we'll move on to the next plugin now. Beyond just EQing, I like to add in a little bit of tape saturation. And what this does is kind of adds a little bit of harmonics. It like generates harmonics similar to how a tape machine would generate distortion or add extra kind of noise. And it just kind of adds this to add a little bit of warmth, because I find that once we cut or boost frequencies like crazy, it does sound a little bit cold or a little bit artificial, so to speak. So that when we add in a little bit of tape saturation, it can add that warmth. So I'll show you a little before and after here. So this tape saturation just adds a little bit more of a warm character and like kind of smooths out all of those boosts that we did. And finally, after the tape saturation, I found like there was still a little bit too much going on in the low end. So I cut quite a bit at about 150 hertz and a little bit at about 400. And I found there was a little frequency here that was kind of odd. So I cut a little bit, and I'll show you before after of these. So I'll turn these off. So that final EQ just kind of rounds off all of the extra frequencies that I feel were interfering with the rest of the drum kit. So I'll show you, I'll solo these drums, and I'll show you how these plugins kind of bring this kick drum to life. So I'll turn them all off. This is all the drums. So you can tell just these three moves made a huge difference with this kick drum. It sticks out a lot more. It's a lot warmer. It's in your face. And I also have this other kick mic that came from Superior Drummer. And this one's kind of just doing a little bit more of the low end. It's just kind of like this low mid thump because we took out so much of the low mids in the original kick. And I've kind of done the same thing here. Like I just brought this, and I was doing a little bit of boosting at 700 hertz, and I took out a little bit of this frequency because I felt that was too much. And it's just to add a little bit more oomph in the low end to the original kick. So this is both kicks together without the low one, with the low one. This could probably come down a little bit. And I also added in a little bit of a kick sample. This is what it sounds like. Because I felt it was still lacking a little bit of that kind of warmth in the low end. So all three of these kicks together kind of sound like this. So it has the high end click, and then it's got a lot of push. It still sounds like it's pushing a lot of air. And all together, I'll show you what these EQ moves do in the mix. Great, and that's pretty much how I go about EQing my kick. This obviously changes with every song, but for heavy music, you don't want to be shy using your EQ. Like you want to be bringing out and accentuating the quality of the kick drum that you really want to hear. And what you just got to do what you got to do so that it comes out in the mix. Because as you heard, when I turned all these off, it was really just sounded like a dead thump as a kick drum. But as soon as I turned on the EQ and the saturation and then this other EQ, all of a sudden now it's cutting through the mix. So I hope that helps you in processing your kicks. If you haven't already, go ahead and download your free Workflow Wizardry PDF. It's it's just a simple framework that will help you finish songs. It's handy to have around your studio, and you can download it at metamindmusic.com/workflow, or you can find it in the description below. And if you have any questions about kick drum processing or programming drums, or want to know anything more about mixing drums, just leave me a question in the comments below, and I'd be happy to come back and reply at a later time, or even make another video on a subject you'd like to see. So until next time, we'll see you later.